Hi, my name is Tabby Flinn, and I'm the A&R Extension Educator for Vigo County, and I'm going to talk today about protecting and encouraging monarchs in your lawn and garden. So we'll first talk about lawn and garden care and how to use less pesticides to promote beneficial insect health without encouraging pests. So how do we keep the pests out and still encourage monarchs? Insects are often seen as a bad thing in lawn and gardens, but they're a very good indicator of a healthy ecosystem. Some are good and some are bad. So we're going to learn with a little bit of imperfections in our lawn and garden, and we're going to talk about cultural and mechanical controls. So learning to live with a little bit of imperfection. Sometimes we can not have to manage insects to completely remove them out of the area. If we have brown spots in our lawn or dandelions here and there, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you can let weeds grow up on the property edges, and the flower gardens can handle a few pests eating their leaves so long as they're not damaging the flowers. So we might have some leaves with holes in them, but that's not the worst thing in the world. Cultural controls can be used to control insects in your lawn and garden as well. And these can be things like choosing the best planting and harvesting times to avoid the pests that are going to be damaging to your fruits and vegetables. You can also use resistant varieties of crops and flowers that insects won't feed on. And if you rotate your crops, you can avoid insects that might be coming up out of the soil where you previously had the same crop. Some other things you can do are plant naturally insect repellent plants. Marigolds are really good at this. Things like plant lice, mosquitoes, and even rabbits really don't like marigolds. So if you plant these in flower beds near your front or back doors, or even in your vegetable garden, you can keep out rabbits and mosquitoes from your plants. Chrysanthemums are another good option. These might be the best plant at deterring bugs. Ants, Japanese beetles, roaches, bed bugs, spider mites, ticks, silverfish, harlequin bugs, plant lice, all kinds of things really don't like chrysanthemums, so they work really well in your garden and lawn. And then we have some other options that are herbs. Things like mint and basil work really well at repelling mosquitoes and spiders. If you have ever used citronella in your lawn and garden, it actually comes from a plant. It's called citronella grass. So everyone knows that citronella is really good at repelling mosquitoes, but a lot of people don't know that it's a grass and you can just grow it around in your landscaping. Lavender is another herb. It smells great. Bees love to pollinate it, but gnats and mosquitoes really hate the smell. So it's a nice one to have around. It smells great in your lawn. If you have it underneath your windows or near your doors, sometimes you can get that smell coming in your house. And then chives work really well against Japanese beetles and carrot rust flies. So if you have carrots that you're trying to grow and you've had problems with rust, this will keep the flies away so you won't be getting the rust in there. Flowers like petunias are really good at repelling asparagus beetles, leaf hoppers, and other types of aphids, tomato hornworms, and many other pests. We can plant bay leaves. Everybody knows garlic repels vampires. It also works really well at propelling Japanese beetles, root maggots, carrot root flies, moths, and all other types of insects. And then rosemary. It smells great to us, but it works really well at repelling bugs that you don't want feeding on your plants, and it's super easy to keep. Another option we can try is mechanical controls. So you can actively go out and pick pests off your plant. If you've got tomatoes and you've got tomato hornworms, you can go out and physically remove those if you see them growing or feeding on your plants. We can go out and pull weeds instead of spraying them. That's going to help a lot too. And then there are things like cages that you can buy, and you can use those on your cabbage and your lettuce if you've got problems with moths or butterflies coming in and their caterpillars destroying your vegetable crops. These little domes work really well. And you can use sticky traps if you've got whiteflies hanging around. You can put them around the base of trees if you've got things like armyworms crawling up your trees, and that way you don't have to use a pesticide. Some other mechanical controls we can use are pheromone related. So we can use Japanese beetle traps. These work really well at drawing in Japanese beetles. It's a good thing to note though that if you're using them, you don't want them to be near the place that you want Japanese beetles out of. You want to have it far away on your property. So if you want to keep them out of the vegetable garden, maybe put the Japanese beetle up in your front yard near the driveway so that the beetles are going there as opposed to closer to your garden. And we can remove a lot of small pests with simply using water. So you can get out your hose and spray aphids and plant lice and things like that off, but that is something that you're going to have to repeat often because those insects might crawl back up onto the plants. We can use soap sprays. These are really effective against larger insects like caterpillars, sawflies, and beetle larvae. They're really effective against smaller insects. So aphids, young scales, whiteflies, psyllids, mealybugs, and spider mites are really affected by soap sprays, but larger insects like caterpillars and beetle larvae are not. So if you're worried about damaging caterpillars in your garden that might be butterfly caterpillars, you don't have to worry about the soaps working on them. And then you can release beneficial insects. So in this picture over here, you can see we're releasing ladybugs. You can also get lacewings, pollinating bees, and many other beneficial insects that are going to help keep the pest populations down. So now that we've talked about limiting our pesticide use, we're going to talk about attracting monarchs. So what do they need? Well, they need a food and a water source. So it's a good idea to plant nectar-rich flowers for the adults and make a butterfly bath. And you can see in this picture here with the butterfly bath, it's not very full. It's got lots of rocks and things in there, and that makes it easy for butterflies to come in and have a drink but not drown in the water. And you might also notice that your bees will utilize these water sources as well. And if you provide host plants, that's going to help bring them in too. They need those plants to lay their eggs on, so we'll talk about those here in a little bit. So now we can talk about some nectar-rich flowers that we can plant, and you'll notice a common theme with these plants. They're all going to be native species to the area. First up is Culver's root. It's a perennial, and it comes up in spring to early summer, so it's one of those really good early blooming plants. It can get up to 4 to 7 feet tall, and it can have white, pink, or blue blooms. This is native. We have it across the state. It's very beautiful, and the butterflies absolutely love it. Up next is stiff tick seed. This is another perennial that blooms spring to early summer. It's about 3 feet tall, and it has these straight stalks with flowering heads on top. So you get these really pretty yellow flowers. It's very drought tolerant, so it's excellent in poor soils, or if you've got sandy soils, it's going to do really well there. Next up is hoary verbena. This is another perennial. It blooms throughout the summer. It's got very pretty purple flowers that are about 4 feet tall, and it's a host plant for the common buckeye, which is another native butterfly. So you might find caterpillars feeding on this, but you'll be rewarded later in the summer when the butterflies start emerging from those chrysalises. The purple coneflower is a really popular one. It's a native species. Lots of people grow it in their gardens. It's another perennial, and it has summertime blooms. The plants can be anywhere from 2 to 5 feet tall, and they'll have these really pretty purple or pinkish colored flowers. It attracts a number of native butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds. Next up, we have tall blazing star. This is another perennial. It's a summer to fall blooming plant that gets about 3 feet tall, and it has these really pretty, fluffy looking purplish pink flower heads. It's very drought tolerant, so it's another one you can use in sandy or poorer soils, and monarchs absolutely love it, as you can tell by this picture here. The common buttonbush is another great plant to bring in. This one's actually a woody shrub, and it blooms in the summer. It gets to about 12 feet tall, so if you buy one at a garden center or you grow it from seed, keep in mind that it can get very large, and it has these white puffy flowers that the butterflies love. It's a very fragrant bush, and it attracts a number of butterfly species as well as bees and other local pollinators. So we talked about the flowers that are going to bring the adults in. Now we're going to talk about the host plants that they're going to utilize for their larvae. And for monarch butterflies, we need to plant milkweed. It's the only host plant of the monarch. There are 73 species native to North America, 9 species native to the North or the Midwest, and 4 species that are preferred over the others in the Midwest to monarchs. And those are the swamp milkweed, the common milkweed, the world milkweed, and the butterfly milkweed. And host plants can change throughout the season depending on availability of food and whether or not it's been rainy or dry and how late in the year it is. So it's a good idea to plant a variety of milkweeds for monarchs. We'll talk about swamp milkweed first. It's a perennial and it blooms throughout the summer. This plant can get about 3 to 6 feet tall, and you'll see these really pretty purple and pink flower heads. It really prefers damp or wet soil. That's why it's called the swamp milkweed. So it's perfect if you have a ditch area or an area of your lawn or garden that really seems to hold water. It'll really excel in that area. Then we have the common milkweed. This is also a perennial, and this is one that we probably see the most of around Indiana. It blooms throughout the summer. It's about 3 to 6 feet tall, and it also has purple to pinkish flowers. It grows really well in sandy soil and many other types of soil, so this one you can utilize throughout your lawn and garden, or if you've got an area that you just want to throw some seeds out, it'll do well there. It's very fragrant, and it can be spread by rhizomes. So those are the rooting structures of the plant. If you were to cut the root and split it, you'd get 2 plants. So farmers see it as a really difficult weed to control in their agricultural fields, but if you're trying to spread milkweed, just cut up the roots and rebury them and you'll get many more plants. Then we have the world milkweed. This one's also a perennial, also blooms throughout the summer. It's anywhere from half a foot tall to 3 feet tall, but unlike the other milkweeds, this one has white flowers, or they can be kind of greenish sometimes too. It's very drought tolerant, but as you can see, there's not a lot of vegetative tissue on this plant, so you need to plant a larger stand of it if it's going to supply monarch caterpillars with food. And then we have the butterfly milkweed. This is one that lots of people like to plant because of its pretty orange blooms. It's a perennial that blooms throughout the summer, and it's about 1 foot to 2 feet tall. And like I mentioned, yellow to orange flowers. We can see it growing a lot on the roadsides near the interstate. It does really well in those large open areas. It's super drought tolerant, so you can plant it anywhere. If you've got sandy soil, it's going to do well there. And it's really easy to grow from seeds. So one thing that we didn't talk about earlier was we need to provide a safe place for the chrysalis to form. So monarchs will typically go anywhere about 10 feet away from the host plants, and they'll utilize trees, shrubs, your garden decorations, potted plants, fences, buildings, just all kinds of stuff. So if you've been planting host plants and nectar-rich plants and you're encouraging monarchs in your area, be really careful when you're moving your garden stuff around. Make sure that you don't have any chrysalises hanging off of things that might get damaged in the move. If they are somewhere that you'd prefer them not to be, an easy thing you can do is just cut it off at the branch, or cut the branch that it's hanging on, or if it's on a structure, you can cut it off right where it attaches, and then you can use a sewing needle and put a piece of thread through that and then tie it somewhere that'd be a little safer for the chrysalis to be. So just a quick overview of what we talked about today. We're going to use less pesticides, so we're going to learn to live with imperfections. We're going to utilize cultural controls and mechanical controls in taking care of those pests that we have in our area. We're going to plant nectar-rich native plants, because native is always best when you're trying to encourage a native species. And we're going to plant host plants, so we're going to plant milkweed, and we're going to do a variety for the changing seasons and temperatures and weather. And then we need to provide chrysalis safety. So be on the lookout for chrysalises in odd places. And if you want to learn more about butterflies, or you want to help scientists discover more about monarchs, here are a couple options for citizen science. Citizen science is a collection of scientific data by individuals who are not professional scientists. So they're utilizing the public, and they're going to train you and help you learn to deal with what they're looking for, so that they can gather data on species. The Monarch Larva Monitoring Project involves citizen science from across the US and Canada, and it's led by researchers at the University of Minnesota, who are developing this program to collect long-term data on larval monarch populations in milkweed habitat. So they're focusing on monarch distribution and abundance during the breeding season in North America. Monarch Watch is a citizen science project based at the Kansas Biological Survey, University of Kansas. And this project involves volunteers across the US and Canada who tag individual butterflies to assist scientists in studying and monitoring monarch populations in the fall migration. So this tagging program helps answer questions about the geographic origins of monarchs that reach Mexico, the timing and pace of their migration, the mortality rates during migration, and changes in geographic distribution. Project Monarch Health is led by researchers at the Institute of Ecology at the University of Georgia, and they're studying monarch health as part of a national citizen science program. They're looking at a parasite that does not affect humans but can hinder a monarch butterfly's ability to grow and survive. So volunteers are capturing live butterflies and collecting parasite spores to help scientists map the location and amounts of parasites and disease in monarch butterfly populations. And then lastly, if you're interested in all types of butterflies, not necessarily just monarchs, there's the North American Butterfly Association butterfly counts. And this is done by volunteers in the US, Canada, and Mexico who conduct a one-day census of all butterflies sighted within a 15-mile circle during the annual North American Butterfly Association's butterfly counts. And the organization will compile and publish the results in annual reports that provide information about the geographical distribution and relative population size of every species that was encountered. And this information can be used to monitor butterfly populations and study the effects of changes in weather and habitats. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today and learning about monarchs. And if you have any questions, you can email me at carol@purdue.edu, or you can also contact Bob. You're also free to drop questions and comments in the comments section below. Thank you.